Hi guys! Today I am finally ready to share my first update in my No Pan Left Behind series. So I will go ahead and link the intro down below if you want to hear a little bit more about this project, why I'm doing it. But essentially the goal of this project is to dip into every single pan of eyeshadow in my collection at least one time throughout the year. So I'm working my way through my whole collection, and for each round, I originally was going to be doing like 5 palettes per round, but I think now I'm going to be a little bit more fluid with it and also take into consideration how many pans are in each palette. So you could have 5 palettes that each have only 4 pans in them, and that would be a very easy round. Or you could have 5 15-pan palettes get selected. So instead, I'm going to continue randomly generating the palettes because I do like that format, but instead of having 5 as a set number, I'm just going to roll until I feel like I have enough pans to focus on for the next month, because I would really like to have these updates come monthly. It's now been almost 2 months since I introduced it, just because in this first round I realized I had way too many eyeshadows I was trying to focus on at once. So in this first round, there ended up being 7 palettes that I was focusing on. Originally, I introduced 6, but anytime I bring in a new palette to my collection, it automatically goes into my current No Pan Left Behind round. And I did purchase the e.l.f. Love You a Latte quad, so that one was added in. I completed this one in like a day because it's very easy to use all 4 of these shades in a look. Out of the 7 palettes in this initial round, 2 of them I've yet to complete. Those are going to roll over into my next round, and I'll pick some new palettes to add in because I do feel like I'm ready to switch things out. Let me talk a little bit about each palette, some of the looks I created with them, some observations I may have had. For each palette that is in the round, not only am I trying to complete the palette, i.e. use every shade at least once, I'm also going to be deciding for each palette whether I want to keep it in my collection or declutter it. So this is kind of like an ongoing palette declutter throughout the year after I've tested each shade. Also, you'll notice I'm not wearing any eyeshadow right now. After I've selected my new round of palettes, I am going to create a look at the end of this video. This has so far been really eye-opening. So let's start with this one. This is the Nomad Chicago Speakeasy palette. I really do think this is a fun color story, a fun theme, and it has some beautiful shades in it, but I've actually decided to declutter this palette. I'm even reluctant to make that decision just because there are a couple shades in here that I really like, but as a palette I just don't find this very cohesive. And for someone this might be the perfect combination of shades, but for me almost half the palette is purple and I'm not the biggest fan of purples, and it's very rare that I would combine like purple and green and like bronzy rusty brown colors. I really like this shade, the Green Mill. That is such a pretty green, and that shade is actually the reason why I'm hesitant to get rid of this, because I really actually enjoyed that green quite a bit. There was one look I did with that as my lid shade, and then I had some browns in the crease. I think I paired it with the NYX Vintage Jean Baby palette, and I loved that look. I thought that was so much fun, very subtle, still like wearable at the same time though, really fun, really like unique kind of look for me. And it's kind of like a pistachio green, like the color of pistachio ice cream, and I just think it's so pretty. So I'm almost like, I do really like a lot of the shades in here, but at the same time I found it kind of a challenge to complete this palette. I find myself dipping into only a handful of shades, and then the rest of the palette I basically don't touch. And I know I could depot the shades I like. I know that's always an option, but I really would prefer, this palette is not old at all. I think I've only had it since the fall, and that rhymed. But I would rather keep it all together and be able to give that to someone to enjoy the full palette, rather than take it apart and just have, you know, an incomplete palette. I don't know. It's just a little bit harder to pass on to someone else when you depot. There was a look I did focusing mostly on the purples, and I did like the look, but at the same time I just don't gravitate to purples. Like if I have an option between purple and like maybe, I do just wish this was a little bit more green heavy, because I really like what's going on here with this matte. I do think the shade in the center is beautiful, even though I only used it once. It also took me a while to get to the shade Windy City, this like really rusty brown. I like warm tones, but not so much these like super rusty colors most of the time. The shade I reached for the most in here, no surprise, was Prohibition, the matte, basically my skin tone color. That's obviously very handy to have for me. If that type of shade is in a palette, I will use it a lot. All the other shades I either use twice or once. And overall, I don't know, I just found it kind of hard to get into this palette, even though, like, at first glance, I was like, wow, that's a really cool color story. But I'm looking at these three shimmers. These are all so pretty, and I'm looking at that green, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to get rid of it. Maybe instead of immediately passing this one on, I'll set it to the side, not look at it for a while, and then come back to it in a few months and see what I think. This is why it's so hard to declutter palettes, because sometimes it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have all these shades in your collection, but like a few of the shades will just keep you coming back. So this was a new palette that was automatically included in this round due to it being new to my collection. The NYX Ultimate Vintage Jean Baby palette. I really love this palette from NYX. Never really tried NYX eyeshadows before this, but I'm really impressed. The only weird thing about this palette, you see those shades that have the blue brackets around them? Like this one, these three down here, and then this one over here. Those, they say, are face pigments. Important, cannot be used on or around eye. Well, I definitely used all of those shades on or around my eyes. Why would I use this or any of these three as a face pigment? Like, what? Anyway, I just thought that was weird. I don't know why those are not considered eye safe. I think it has something to do with like maybe the coloring that they use in there. I don't know. I'm just speculating here, but I know I've heard that sometimes pigments can be marked as not eye safe because they could potentially stain the skin around your eye. I didn't get any staining with these, so I don't know if that's the case, but none of the shimmers were labeled that way. All the shimmers are eye safe, even the ones that are kind of glittery, so there's no pressed glitters in here. I just thought that was strange. I mean, where else am I going to use these blue shades if not my eyes? Like, I just don't use those kinds of colors on my face, so I don't know, I just thought that was weird. I guess it's probably just like they legally have to put that on there, but from my personal experience, I was able to use them on my eyes with no problem. Obviously, try it at your own risk. It did take me a while to get to some of the shades in here, especially like this brighter blue, the darker navy blue, the darker blue shimmer. Those were some of the last shades for me to get to. But then there were some shades in here I ended up using a ton. My most used shade was the shade number 3 here, this light beige matte shade. That's another one of those types of shades that if that shade is in a palette, I'm going to use it all the time because it's just so handy to start out my crease, blend shades out. It's just perfect. I also used the shade 6 quite a few times, actually. That was this light brown matte over here. That shade I used 5 times. And then I also used shade 1 5 times. This frosty shimmer, that's a really fun shimmer shade. All the shimmers in here are gorgeous. I really love that one in the inner corner, or even on the lid kind of as a topper. There was one look I did with this palette where I really focused in on the taupes and grays in here. I used like the silver, this taupe shimmer. I also used, I think, this light shade in the inner corner. I maybe even used this plummy shade in that look. And then some of the mattes as well. Another one I absolutely fell in love with this round was the Unleash a Glitterpedia #1 palette. This is so fun. The last shades I used, the ones that took me the longest to get to, were the really chunky pressed glitters, and those are truly pressed glitters. I've never really used pressed glitters on my eyes, but I did for this project because well, first of all, it doesn't have any sort of label that says they're not eye safe, so I used them. They didn't seem to bother my eyes at all. So the shades I ended up using the most in here, let's see, Prime, this shimmer, you can see I have much more of a dip going on in that shade now. That is such a pretty, like, just wet looking shimmer. This just has the most beautiful textures. If you like shimmers, different kinds of shimmers, all the way from softer satin shimmers to really chunky glitters, this is a great palette. It's all shimmer. It's kind of just like a one-stop shop for toppers. Most of the shades in here are translucent or even have a transparent base, except for, I would say, like this satin light brown shade. That one is more of like a kind of thing you throw all over the lid for a one and done, like light brown look. Yeah, just really fun if you're into shimmers. I paired this a lot with the other palettes that were in the round, especially there was a look where I paired this with the NYX Vintage Jean Baby palette, and I paired it with some of those light mattes. Also, one time I used some of the shimmers in here as a topper for the e.l.f. Love You a Latte quad, and then I put the ColourPop La Playa single in the inner corner, that mint green, that I'm working on in my 7 by Spring project pan. So that was probably one of my favorite looks I did, honestly. And I love that combo of light green and light brown, like that kind of mint chocolate chip sort of look. That I was really into. I did that type of color combo several times throughout the last month or two. So speaking of the e.l.f. Love You a Latte quad, this was very easy to complete. I think I did knock it out in just one use. I feel like I used this more than I actually did, unless I forgot to track any uses, which I don't think I did. I've only used this palette twice since I got it, so hopefully I'll end up using it more. I think I've just really been trying to juggle too many palettes all at once. But I do think this is the kind of palette that'll be great to just kind of keep in my vanity to have for some of those staple mattes that I use all the time. And so far I'm loving the quality of this. The mattes are very soft and blendable and just really easy to work with. Then there's the Nomad New Zealand Stargazing, another Nomad palette. I was debating also decluttering this because even though I think it's a really fun palette, again, it's just a lot of bold colors that I don't reach into all the time. But I actually decided that I am going to keep this because it is definitely out of my comfort zone. A lot of shades in here I'm not going to reach into on a daily basis. And some of them did take me a while to get to, but once I got to all of them, every single time I was like, wow, that's really fun. That's a really cool shade. Milky Way, Southern Cross, those were some of the last shades I got to, and I still was just blown away by them. For me, it's a little bit easier to create a look with this one versus the Chicago Speakeasy, where I feel like there's some of the shades I just don't really care about in this palette, whereas this one, I do enjoy playing around with every single shade. Sometimes I do like to do colorful looks, especially for filming, so I do think this one makes sense to keep around. The shades I ended up using the most out of this one were, let's see, Southern Lights. I like that shade a lot for the crease. And then I also used Queenstown Skyline 4 times, both of those shades. I used 4 times. Queenstown Skyline, another just like beige blending shade. So no surprise that ended up being one of my most used shades out of here. A lot of the more colorful and darker shades took me a while to get to. All 3 of these, like these 2 dark blue mattes and the black matte, those are some of the last shades I reached into. I actually ended up using this purple for like kind of a pink and purple Valentine's Day look. This actually ended up being a great palette to have in for February. A lot of fun. I wasn't sure at first because, like I said, I don't feel like I use a lot of those really bold colors that much, but I ended up just having a lot of fun with this one. Those are the palettes I completed. Then there were 2 palettes in this first round that I didn't complete, so they're going to be rolled into the next round. First up, we had the Kaleidos Escape Pod palette. I think as we get into March and early spring, or at least kind of getting in the mood for spring, I'll be using this a little bit more. But for January and February, like, I'm just not really going for shades like this. So I want to keep it in for another rotation. I do think I'll be able to get to all the shades in just another couple weeks. But yeah, I ended up only using several of the shades once. So far, my most used shade is Starlight Sonata, which I've used twice only. Clearly, the shades I haven't touched yet are a lot of these really bright shades up top. I could have saved this one for like the summertime, but part of the reason why I want to do this challenge this way, doing totally randomized palettes, is to push myself out of my usual ways of doing eyeshadow, where I really kind of limit myself to what I consider to be like seasonally fitting palettes. Sometimes I just won't even touch palettes like this in the colder months when you can absolutely do colorful looks in the colder months. So it's really just a way to challenge me a little bit. So this one is just going to stay in for another round. The other one I did not yet complete was my Magnetic Singles palette that I randomly generated in the intro. One of these is just part of my 7 by Spring project pan, this round pan. All the others were randomly generated last time. These all happen to be depotted BH Cosmetics shadows. And I did use a few of them, but I still need to get around to using all of them. The shades I did get to were Villa, which is the light peachy pink matte, 90210 here, which is that lilac shade from the BH Lost in LA palette. That one was fun. I actually paired that, I think, with the Kaleidos Escape Pod palette, some of those purples once. Then I also did reach into Marina, which is this light pink metallic shimmer from, I think, the BH Summer in Saint Tropez palette. And then I did use La Playa only 3 times, which I need to use it some more. But I do think this is a cute little color story, even though it's a little weird. Totally randomly generated, as you can tell. But I also think they're kind of fun together. The peaches, the greens, the pinks. So I think I should be able to create some more looks with this in this next round. So those two will be staying with us for another rotation. And then Nomad Chicago Speakeasy is the only one I've decided to, I don't even want to say declutter, I'm just going to set it aside, but I do think I will declutter this because one thing I really don't want to do is keep palettes for 1 or 2 shades, which is kind of what I feel like I'm doing with this. So you know what, I am just going to go ahead and pass this on. I have plenty of other beautiful eyeshadows. I don't think I'll really think about it that much. Oh, one thing I wanted to say as well, because I did have some people ask, I am counting uses of any palette, even ones that are not included in my current round of No Pan Left Behind. Anytime I dip into any shadow, I am tallying it on my spreadsheet because I want it to count towards this challenge. Because really, like I said, the goal is to just dip into every shade of my collection. So as part of my updates, I also want to share palettes that I may have completed organically outside of the current No Pan Left Behind round. There was one that I completed, and it is a duo, so it was very easy to complete this, but this is the What's Up Beauty Latte-tude eyeshadow duo. I used this in my Mocha Mousse Shop My Stash, where I shopped my stash for like Mocha Mousse type colors, and this was one of the things I used for my eye look. Love this little duo. It is so beautiful. This was actually the first palette that I completed this year, and I am counting this as a palette because it has more than one pan in it. If you're wondering about individually packaged single eyeshadows like shadow sticks or liquid shadows, I am counting uses on these this year, but not as part of my No Pan Left Behind challenge. I'm just going to try to organically reach for all of those at least once this year, but I'm not including those in this project. So I think that's all the information that I wanted to share. I don't have any other new palettes that have come in, so there won't be any new palettes in this round, at least not yet. Unless a new one does come in, and then I will add it in. So I've pulled up my Tiny Decisions wheel of palettes. I've taken out all the ones that I've already completed. Ooh, okay, we got ABH Sultry. I'm happy to have a neutral palette. This will be fun. I love this palette. I think it's so great for any time of year, and I think this pop of coral makes it really fun for spring as well. Clearly, I already have spring on the brain. All right, let's pick another. Sigma Cool Neutrals. Ooh, that was one of my most used palettes of 2024 last year. And it's another mostly neutral palette, but it actually does lean kind of dark, so it's fun for kind of sultry, smoky looks. I actually think these two together could create some fun looks as well. Yay! 2 neutral palettes. I can't complain about that. Let's do one more for now. Or is that going to be... No, let's do one more. Oh, what? I thought I removed this one, NYX Vintage Jean Baby. Well, I've already completed that one, so let's just roll again. Ooh, another colorful one, Nomad Royal Europe. This one is fun. There might actually be 3 shades in here that I have never touched in the almost 2 years I've had this palette. I am not proud of that. Paina Palace, Hall of Mirrors, and the Ballroom. I almost thought that said the bathroom. Those all look untouched. So that's why we're doing this project. What I really love this palette for is this bottom row of multi-chromes. I think this will be a lot of fun. Definitely hard, but fun. And I think with that is that enough? Do I want to pick one more? Ooh, part of me wants to pick one more, even though I know I shouldn't. I'm so tempted to pick another one, but you know what? I think this is plenty of shades to focus on. I think this is enough. I think I really shouldn't have more than 5 at a time, even though I'm so tempted to spin again and see what I get, but I'm not going to do it. I'm going to hold back. And so now what I want to do is, I think I'll just randomly generate one of these and just use that palette, but not do it palette bingo style. I was thinking about that, but I actually have to go to work later, so I don't want to risk having like crazy colors on my eyes. So I'm just gonna use my random number generator to pick 1 through 5 in this order that they're stacked right now. So we've got the Magnetic Palette, Kaleidos Escape Pod, Sigma Cool Neutrals, ABH Sultry, and Nomad Royal Europe. Let's pick one. Got 4. Ooh, yeah. So the 4th one down is Sultry, which I'm excited to use. Actually, I think I can do a palette bingo with Sultry because this is all pretty like neutral shades. All right, let's do it. You know I can't resist a palette bingo. So I am going to randomly generate 5 shades. That's how I typically do palette bingos. from this palette, let's draw some shades. 12, 5, 10, 9, and 6. Okay, so here's our color palette. I mean, it's a lot of like mid-tones, but that's fine. That's fine with me. Shade 12 is Cyborg, the silver. Shade 5 is Ember, the kind of olivey taupe shimmer. Shade 10 is Teak, this more like slightly warmer taupe shimmer. 9 is Twig, which is a matte taupe. Really glad to see that we got a nice like light matte. And then shade 6 is Bloom, the really fun matte coral. So there is our color story that we're working with. I'm kind of thinking something starring Bloom in the crease would be fun. I have already primed my lids with the e.l.f. Lock It Down eyeshadow primer. Okay, I'm going to start out with Bloom. Just a little bit of that, and I'm going to dust that in the crease. Next, I want to take some of that other matte, Twig. Those are the only two mattes we got, so gotta make the most of them. This one I'm going to pack in my outer corner just to deepen up a little bit. I don't want to mix it too much with Bloom. Okay, I closed my curtains because I think the light was just too much. Too much. Blending, blending, blending. Okay, so first of all, is Cyborg not like the prettiest color ever? That is so pretty. I never realized how much taupe there was to that silver. I want that on my lid. That's what I want. Ooh. Okay, this is really fun. I like this a lot. I am excited to have this palette in this round. I really think I'm gonna enjoy it a lot. I would love to even have kind of a loose gold hip pan in one of the shades in here because I have had this a long time. I have a lot of dips going, especially in the shimmers. So, you know what, let's go ahead and just say that now. So now I think we'll just take like a little bit of Ember kind of in this like in between the silver and the matte taupe. Okay, and then the only shade I haven't used yet is Teak, which is that warmer brown shimmer. I guess I'll put that shade on the lower lash line, so I'll just take some of that on a small brush, and yeah, that works. It's a fun look, actually. You never know with palette bingo, sometimes they can just be impossible, but this was actually a really good group of shades. You know, I'm just not loving that Ember shade on the lid, though. It's just kind of too much green. I wasn't really going for green. I think I'll just take a little bit of Teak and kind of layer it on top. I want a little bit more warmth on the lid. A little more blending. I love this kind of look this time, like late winter, when we're all kind of ready for spring. So there's that little hint of like the springy coral shade, but yeah, I'm really liking this a lot. Okay, I'm gonna take just a little bit of my face powder and use that to clean up the edges here and around the outside. I think I'll use my NYX Epic Smoke liner today on just the upper lash line for a nice little smoky wing. I love this liner. It's great. So there's the completed look. I went with a nice pinky lip. I have on the e.l.f. Cream Glide Lip Liner in Pinky Swear, topped with the Lawless Forget the Filler Lip Plumping Gloss in Juicy Watermelon. And I'm just loving the springy vibes going on in this look. I think it's so fun. Really got me excited to play with this palette some more, as well as all these other palettes. I am enjoying this project so much. I think it's really just, I don't know, it's just a lot of fun. Every day I look forward to putting my makeup on even more than I used to because I look forward to tallying off my uses. I just find it so fun. So I hope you guys are enjoying this project as much as I am. Let me know if you're doing anything similar this year. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Make sure you hit that notification bell as well so you don't miss any future uploads. And otherwise, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, and I'll talk to you very soon in my next video. Bye!